Now, the biggest demographic of hip-hop listeners is white, or is it? This is one of those conversations that randomly popped up in my head. You know, I was randomly thinking to myself, who really is the biggest demographic of hip-hop listeners? I did a little bit of research, a little bit of thinking, and yeah, I came to a conclusion. So I have a thing or two to say about this topic. So yeah. Let's talk about it. Now, to start the video off, I want to quote the one and only Eminem, and specifically what he said on his song White America. What he said was, let's do the math, if I was black, I would have sold half. Eminem is by far one of the most successful rappers walking on this planet today. This is a guy who came out at a time where being white in hip-hop was definitely a disadvantage if we look at it from the respect and fitting in side of things. Despite having the amount of talent Eminem had, M had to in a way work twice as hard as everyone else just to fully show the game that he deserved the success that was coming his way as a white artist in a predominantly black genre. Even though he was at a disadvantage from that perspective, if Eminem was black, what if he really sold as many records as he has today? Obviously, I'm asking this because of what he said himself. If I was black, I would have sold half. Now, Eminem acknowledges the fact that him being white has helped him sell records. In what way has it helped him sell those records though? Well, this is Eminem pretty much saying, without actually saying it, the biggest demographic of hip-hop listeners are white, and I'm a reflection of that audience, so that's why I would have sold half if I was black. Just from a marketability standpoint, and most importantly of all, relatability aspect, this has definitely put Eminem in an advantageous position. Most people who listen to and support Eminem though don't really do it because he's white. They do it because he makes good music, plain and simple. Here's the thing though, the white thing is more of an unconscious factor, meaning it only makes sense to support someone who looks like you because you feel like they understand where you're coming from. This obviously doesn't only relate to what I'm talking about, it's a human being thing. We stand behind and or connect with the ones we perceive as the most relatable ones. Although there probably is a percentage of people who support him purely because he's white, I'd say that percentage is extremely minuscule and shouldn't be accounted for. I want to show you this 2005 article where they talk about this exact topic that we're discussing right now. Is the conventional wisdom correct in measuring hip-hop audience is the title of it, and I'm going to leave a link to it in the description below. The article starts off by saying it's hard to read an article about hip-hop without encountering the claim that 70 to 80% of people who buy rap music are white, and then continues and says the statistics is a favorite of journalists and industry executives because it defies the misconception still making the rounds that rap fans are mostly black, and shows that it is instead mainstream music and mainstream business. Often, the 70% statistic isn't attributed but merely recited as gospel, making it tough to find its original source. Many articles, stretching from 1999 to this year, attribute the numbers to SoundScan, a sales tracking company. For example, this Philadelphia Inquirer article from last year reported, according to SoundScan, which tracks sales in the music industry, as much as 70% of the paying and downloading hip-hop audience is white kids living in the burbs. But a spokesman for SoundScan, now part of the VNU's Nielsen media tracking unit, says the company has never tracked the race of music buyers. He says a related company, SoundData, may have reported the stat in 1999, but SoundData no longer exists, and he couldn't locate anyone who recalled the details. So as you can see, there was an article that came out at one point that claimed that 70% of the downloading and paying hip-hop audience was white. But as you could also hear, according to someone who used to work at that company who had access to the stats, they never tracked the race of their customers to begin with. And on top of the company not existing anymore, they couldn't find anyone who remembered the fine details. A little bit later on the article though, we do get some actual receipts. A group of researchers who interviewed people at their homes about their media habits conducted a little study, and this is where we got some answers. Among the questions MRI asks is whether the respondent purchased pre-recorded rap audio tapes and compact discs in the last 12 months. By the way, MRI is the group of researchers in this case, just so you follow. Continuing though, MRI sent me the results for 1995, 1999, and 2001 for both adults 18 to 34 and for all adults for both groups, and check this out, the percentage of recent rap buyers who are white was about 70% to 75% for all 3 years. Now this study was conducted a while ago, keep that in mind. Also keep in mind the fact that the 70% to 75% stats were for 3 separate years and not a chunk of time together, okay? And last but not least, also keep this in mind, hip-hop is literally a million times bigger than it was back then. For example, Eminem is reaching way more people now than he was reaching back then with his music. If, as an example, Eminem had a predominantly white audience, which most likely he did back then that predominantly white audience is so much bigger right now. It's literally no competition because hip-hop is such a big genre. Hip-hop is getting consumed like fast food nowadays. nowadays. Ain't no barriers on how many people are tuning into the genre. The relevancy and credibility of this article can be questioned due to the time concern, but I think it's interesting how the percentage was so high. After all, we're talking about 3 separate years. Now granted, let's say that the study was done now, I can already think about a couple things that are worth noting since hip-hop is such a big genre. One of those things is the distribution of all those different races of people who are consuming rap music is for sure gonna be way more diverse. So yeah, if the percentage of white rap buyers during those years was 70 to 75%, I wouldn't be surprised if that number actually got reduced by a little bit. Maybe it's at 60% in 2021 or even 50%. And this might sound a little bit weird. I mean, why would it reduce? The reason why I'm saying this is because the genre is reaching way more people, yeah, but how that percentage actually gets distributed to the white demographic, the black demographic, the Asian demographic, whoever is consuming the music is the real focus here. A good analogy for what I'm trying to say, this cake, and I ain't talking about no ass, that we call the hip-hop demographic now has to get split in way more pieces because there are way more people consuming the cake, aka more people are listening to the genre. I say that to say I still think the majority of the hip-hop demographic as far as listeners would still end up being white. I can't imagine that number being less than 50%, honestly. Now I want to talk about something else related to this topic and consider this the second part of this video / conversation, but I wanted to talk about Chicago rapper No Name and some feelings she expressed towards her white audience as a hip-hop artist. In November 2019, she went on somewhat of a rant on Twitter where she was addressing her frustration with performing in front of predominantly white crowds. No Name says she won't keep performing for predominantly white crowds, will quit rap. No Name is fed up. The Chicago rapper appears to have recently had an epiphany and is now threatening to fall back from rap. Now, No Name was fed up with the fact that black people aren't really supporting her music like that, and or that white people are the only ones who are supporting her music. She approached whatever she was trying to say in an extremely bad way though, if you ask me. You gotta keep in mind that white people are the backbone of the entertainment culture, as in the ones who dump the most amount of money into, for example, going to concerts, buying records, merch, and all that. Speaking from personal experiences, every single concert I've gone to, the majority of the crowd has always been white every single time. So whenever I see comments like insert rapper's name has so many white fans at his show, well, white people are the ones who are showing up and purchasing those tickets. And why is this the case, by the way? Well, since we're speaking on this No Name situation and her white versus black audience comes into play, the most straightforward explanation for this, the poverty rate in our community, I'm talking about the black community right now, is significantly higher than the poverty rate amongst white people. I'll provide some receipts in the description, by the way. You can also see those receipts / sources on the screen as we speak. But in relation to what we're talking about right now, this simply means that your next meal, rightfully so, is more important than putting that money towards entertainment, as in concert tickets, merch, whatever. I'm approaching this from the whole poverty convo and why white people generally speaking dump more money into entertainment. In this No Name case, that explains why her shows are full of white people, and that's the case for the majority of rappers. Not only talking about concert tickets here, by the way, we're talking support in general. Something else I want to bring up before we move on, and it's a pretty straightforward statistic, but here it is. 45.8% of young black children under the age of 6 live in poverty compared to 14.5% of white children. These stats obviously have nothing to do with the hip-hop demographic, but it does explain and tell us one thing. Looking at the grand scheme side of things, put a white kid and a black kid under the age of 6 next to each other, and if both of them are hypothetically speaking hip-hop fans, the white kid is gonna be the one who has the means to support his favorite rapper, because unlike the young black kid, the likelihood of him living in poverty is significantly lower. And this means what? Well, it means that the white kid in this case won't be in a constant state of survival. As a matter of fact, he'll be thriving because he's not surrounded by poverty in his household. That gives him the opportunity to spend whatever little money he has over on things like his favorite rapper's merch and concert tickets. Meanwhile, the young black kid has other concerns like, am I gonna be able to eat tomorrow? It's impossible to be in a place where you're thriving if you're stuck in a cycle where you have to worry about always surviving. Food for thought. Again, these numbers are in no way connected to hip-hop, but we have to look at society as a whole if we're gonna have some of these discussions. Now, regarding the No Name situation, just some of my final thoughts on that. Making your white fans feel bad about supporting you is never a good move. I think this is a really good way to alienate the loyal fan base that you do have, because No Name was saying, hey, I refuse to perform for a predominantly white crowd, or as she put it, I don't want to dance on a stage for white people. If you didn't know, by the way, No Name is a very pro-black artist, and the kind of topics she touches on in her music music are intended to uplift our people, referring to black people obviously. For the record, that's something I personally respect the hell out of. I mean, who doesn't? But her perspective on this matter was definitely off as far as I see it. You having a predominantly white crowd showing up to see you perform is actually a really good thing, because you get to be the person who educates your white fans on what it's really like on that other side, so to speak. You're that voice who gets to shine light on the things that are really going on in the black community. And this is one way to look at it. Obviously a very optimistic perspective, which I prefer. We got to keep this in mind. Some people truly don't know what it's like on that other side. They don't have any kind of sense of what it's like growing up in an environment where you have to constantly look over your shoulder, be alert 24/7, because if not, that's the end of it. That's why To Pimp a Butterfly is so important, okay? Kendrick managed to bring all that plus 1,000 more things into one beautiful body of work. He highlighted the black struggle on an album that so happened to be consumed by millions and millions of white people. For a lot of them, that might have been their only insight into the black struggle, and maybe it still is till this day. How many white Kendrick fans didn't hear that and at least got some kind of perspective, no matter how much insight and perspective into that environment? It's all about exposure, and guys like Kendrick are using their influential platform to enlighten others on what they don't know, in this case, white fans, because that's what we're talking about. The other side of this conversation is the fact that because you're white, you don't understand the struggle that your favorite black hip-hop artist is speaking on. Now, I agree with that. You for sure don't understand the black struggle, okay? You don't understand what it's like to be profiled because of how you look. But on the other hand, depending on how you grew up and what kind of upbringing you had, you can understand starving, poverty, and whatever other struggle you can think of, because struggle doesn't have color, it's universal. A textbook example of this is Eminem. How much shit did Eminem go through? Like 21 said, a lot. Not only did he come from poverty, but his father abandoned him as a baby. His mother neglected him as a child and was an addict. She also almost died while giving birth to him. He was frequently bullied in school. His uncle, who Eminem was extremely close to, took his life in the 90s. I could go on and on and on, but you get my point, right? Let me finish what I was saying about Kendrick. Kendrick Lamar is always going to talk about the black struggle because that's what he's experienced. A white fan may truly not understand where he's coming from, but they can certainly get some perspective. Kendrick can and is for sure serving as that one bridge that helps his white fans get some insight into the world he comes from. Now let's talk about Lil Wayne. A couple years ago, he did an interview where he spoke on a bunch of things, one of them being racism in relation to himself. He got asked about what the majority of his crowd being white really means.
A lot of white kids love rap.
Yes.
Explain that. What does that say to you? What's the message of it? What's the bigger picture of it?
Now this was Wayne's response to that question.
I don't want to be bashed because I don't want to sound like I'm on the wrong if there is a side, but I thought that was clearly a message that there was no such thing as racism.
Wayne then validates his opinion on this by saying that he doesn't see one group of people at his shows, but he sees everyone.
When I look out and I come up off the stage, when I'm coming out the bottom of the stage of my show, when I'm on tour, and I'm in my stance or whatever, and I open my eyes and I see everybody.
Now that's what Lil Wayne's worldview is, right? Can't knock it because he's living his truth and is speaking on it with conviction. He gets my respect for that. Although I gotta say, I definitely do not agree with the no such thing as racism comment. Let's not forget that Wayne is speaking from the perspective of an extremely successful musician and entertainer, and we gotta keep in mind, a successful musician has no color. If you're great at what you do, people will accept you, embrace you, love you, right? But that doesn't mean that racism isn't a very much prevalent thing that's still affecting the world around us. Again, it all comes down to what Wayne is seeing. I can't truly feel what he's saying because I'm not in his position. Also, I wouldn't say that that's the demographic that Lil Wayne is speaking to, as in white people, because the kind of music he's been making since day one is the kind of music that can get consumed by any and everyone. Lil Wayne is a mainstream rapper though, and has been one for a very long time. He knows that those white kids that they were talking about in that interview are a big reason why he's able to make a living and stay eating off of his craft. At the end of the day, Wayne is a businessman, and as a smart businessman, you don't want to alienate potential customers over things they can control like their skin color. That stuff to me is trivial as far as this conversation goes, because entertainment is consumed by everyone regardless of race. But yeah, any thoughts on this entire topic? Definitely a very interesting conversation. What would you say about the whole white people are the biggest demographic of listeners in hip-hop statement? Anything you have to say about that? Definitely let me know in the comment section below, and let's have a discussion about this.